Hello guys, welcome back to the next tutorial. In this one, we're going to talk about exceptions and how do we handle exceptions in Python language. So all of us while coding, knowingly or unknowingly, we make errors. We really do make mistakes. But we need to make sure that our program runs fine, so it just doesn't face any issues, it just doesn't face any unexpected exceptions, and we don't see it breaking, right? So we want to make sure that we handle exceptions quite well and our code runs smoothly. So let's just bring up PyCharm and let's learn about exceptions. So exceptions are nothing but just errors, and sometimes it's unknowingly, sometimes that we don't know what conditions can happen and all those sort of things. But what we need to make sure is that we handle all the exceptions in our code, and we want to make sure that the code is working the way we expect it and there are no unwanted issues, right? So first of all, I just want to show you a link which lists all the exceptions in Python 3. So it's already there. I have kept it open. So these are all built-in exceptions. You guys can see up there from here: concrete exceptions, assertion error, attribute error, import error, index error, key error. So for dictionaries, memory error, name error, lot of different kind of errors, right? So but you know what, the good part is that you don't have to remember these errors. So there are ways in Python that we don't have to really type the name of the actual exception. Python just finds it on its own. So I would never recommend you guys to remember this and go through it. You guys can definitely go through it to understand what different kind of exceptions are, but you don't really have to remember it. So that's a good part. So I'm just gonna close it for right now, and the link is already there in the code file, which you're gonna already have it because I'm gonna upload it. So there you can see all the type of exceptions. Now let's take a look at what the exceptions are. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create a method called maybe exception handling, just giving it a name. And so let's try to do few stuff. So let's imagine situations where my variable name is a and it has a value called 10, b has a value called 20, and c has a value called maybe again 10, right? And what I'm doing is d equals to a plus b, and this divides by c, right? So what I want to do is let's just print d. That's it. So when I just run this code, so I'm just going to call this method. So here I'm just calling this method. So if I just run this code, what it gives me is the value 3, right? So 20 plus 10, 30 divided by 10 is 3, right? So now let's see, imagine that you don't know these values of the variables, right? They might get changed during the program where you are assigning some value to some other variable, and to a different variable you are assigning a different value where these values might change, right? So let's imagine that this value becomes 0 at some point, and when I run this code right now, it gives me an error, right? This shows some error. What the error says, it says 0 division error, division by 0, right? Why? Because we have the value 0 equals to c, and we are trying to divide this expression by c, which is 0, and division by 0 is not possible, so it gives us an exception, right? This is what we know an exception is, or simply an error is, which is kind of unexpected, right? Or sometimes it's expected also. We expect an error to happen and then we handle that exception. So it is both kind of things. But these kind of exceptions happen, right? What other kind of exception can happen? Let's assume that this is perfectly fine, but in the value of b, I have some string, maybe just like any string, right? And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to add a string to the number and then try to divide it, right? So let's try to run this code. So if I run this code, it again shows me an exception which says type error, and it says unsupported operand types because it's trying to add integer to a string, right? Which is not possible. So these are the kind of exceptions that we see. So now is the question that how do we handle that exceptions, right? So to handle the exceptions, what we do is we use the try and except block. If you're coming from Java, you might be familiar with try and catch. In Python, we call it except. So try is just like try, and we have to put the colon, as we know in Python we do for method names, if conditions, for conditions, everything. And so whatever. we want to try whatever code that we want to try, we put in the try block, and the code that handles the exception can be put in the except block. So I'm just gonna indent it this way, and after that I can just put except. So this is the keyword, and put the colon, and here I can say maybe just print something in the except block. This is not possible. Because this is not possible, I'm in the except block right now. So let's run this code right now at this point. So let's see what happens. If I'm gonna run this code, it shows me in the except block this is not possible, right? So it doesn't show me any weird errors and warnings and those kind of things. What happens right now is it handles the exception. So it tries this thing, it tries to add a plus b and then divide by c, but then as soon as it hit this line, it encounters an exception or an error, and then it just goes to the except block, and then it just executes this code. So we don't see any unwanted exception warnings or issues that stops our code from running. Our code still runs fine, smoothly, and we can print our own messages, we can do our own stuff. Here we can try something else, we can still do something else, maybe conversion or some other thing, but we can, yes, continuously run and run our code smoothly. So that's how we handle the exceptions. Instead of this, let's say if I have this correct, and let's take a look at the zero division error. So if I just make it 0, I'm gonna see this thing again, the same issue, right? So in the except block, this is not possible. So I'm not seeing different error messages right now, right? Because I handle the exception, and that's pretty neat, pretty decent coding, right? What other way we have, guys? So let's assume this thing, that I have this string and this is a 0. So right now I have both the issues, right? I have b as string, which I'm trying to add to an integer, and then I have c as 0, which I'm trying to divide, right? So what I can do is I can handle exceptions by name also. So what I can do here is maybe 0 division error. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna handle the 0 division. So I'm just gonna modify the method so we know where we are. So let's say 0 division, right? And then I can handle one more exception here. So this is the way to handle multiple exceptions, or we can handle the same line as well, but I like it the neat way. So we can put different except blocks and we can handle different exceptions. So here I'm gonna say type error. Type error was the one to add strings, so just put the colon up here. So this is the syntax, right? The colon comes after the try block, after the except block, and everything, right? So here I can say print, and this is the can't add string to integer, right? So this is the next one. So let's try to run this code and see where it lands. So when I'm gonna run this code, it says can't add string to integer. So why it happened? Because the first thing it encountered was adding the string to integer, because this is string, and it tried to add string to integer. So as soon as it tried to do that, it just landed into this except block, and it skipped this one because this is happening afterwards. The first expression to take place is adding of a string to the integer. So it just landed into this except block and it ran this code, right? Let's assume that if I didn't have this one and I just had this as a normal integer and I run this code, so what happens is it says 0 division. Why? Because it landed into this except block. So what I'm trying to say is you can have multiple type of exceptions, and you can print or do different kind of stuff based on different kind of exceptions, and you can make your code smart to behave accordingly, right? So this is the whole intent of showing how to handle multiple exceptions, but usually we don't really do that. So I'm just gonna right now comment it so you guys have the code handy. But usually what we do is we just put one except block, so we don't have to remember all the different kind of exceptions, because that's completely like so terrifying to remember all those things. So I would just say using one except without any exception type, and you can put anything. I'm just printing right now in the except block, but you can modify your code to say whatever you want to do when an exception is occurred, right? So that's pretty much it, guys. That's the very basics of the exceptions. In the next lectures, we're gonna see a few more things like the finally block and the else block, and the race and all those things. So I would say download this code file, practice as much as you can, as I always focus on, and let me know if you have any questions. So thanks for attending, guys. Stay tuned for the next lecture. Thanks, guys.